welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Wortmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. As we cultivate conversations pertinent to nation building, we have gathered a group of panelists, all Guyanese, to discuss agriculture and Guyana's opportunity to become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Our panel includes Aubrey Sultan, a university graduate in agriculture science and a large scale farm manager. Marion Stewart is an expert in agro-processing and works at the Guyana School of Agriculture. Julius David is a university graduate in agriculture science and operates in the education sector. Limar Williams is one of our youth panelists, a UWI Law graduate and a Caribbean man at heart. Kurt Corbin is a security, project management, and administration professional residing in Geneva, Switzerland. And yours truly, Siobhan Corbin. I will be your moderator for this segment. As we welcome the panelists, welcome. As we prepare
Thank
to
you.
discuss agriculture, I believe the breadbasket tag may seem a bit cliche, but in Europe, what we see is the impact of the Ukraine Russia conflict and what it is doing on the supermarket shelves in terms of the freshness of the produce and even the availability. I believe we need to signal to our viewers that we see the international community touting the next pandemic as hunger due to food insecurity. So today, let's have a chat. Let's look at the opportunities for Guyana. And I'll pose the first question to you, Aubrey. And panelists, you can lean in as Aubrey takes us through this first question. Let's talk together about the big opportunities in agriculture for small and large scale farmers. Aubrey, what's your take?
So, welcome again to Choices Global. And I want to start off by explaining what happened over a 2 year span before I get directly into the question. So, in the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic started, we in the Caribbean started to feel a squeeze when it comes to um, production and when it comes to food security, right? So that caused a minute problem at the beginning of the pandemic. And as the years progressed, the 2 years that the pandemic happened, it started to increase. So just as it started to increase, we were hit with another situation with the war in Europe. So that caused things to be um, very unhealthy for the Caribbean in terms of food security. And so, coming out of those issues, we have big opportunities. And the one that I'd like to mention is the initiative that the president, um, Dr. Irfan Ali, started with the Agri Investment Expo. And that is birthed because of the fact that these issues are being faced with all of the Caribbean countries. And so um, to go against that, this is how the initiative was birthed. And just a part of the initiative, it's to increase and to start production where we haven't in plants and livestock. And I'll leave it there so that the other panelists could bounce off of some of the things that I've mentioned.
Guyana stands to move in that direction. Um, where we've been saying it is years now, we've been saying that Guyana has the potential to become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. What do we have? How is that possible? We have the lands that are necessary for cultivation. Agriculture, it the in order for agriculture to move forward, land must be available. We have all kind of technologies, but land is so essential, and that is why we've seen that one of the memorandum being signed by Guyana and Barbados is to lease land to Barbados. How many acres of land? Because why? mean we may make a lot of noise over it, but Barbados seem to have the technology to cultivate these lands. We have the land, we don't have the technology, and in many instances, we might not have the willingness of people to go into that direction. And so, if we're to move forward, then we have to put these things in place. And so we are partnering with Barbados in terms of the cultivations of these land. The second thing is there is a conversation that have started as well, um, where we have fertilizers and these different chemicals give license and set up, the different framework for it to start manufacturing in Guyana. We spoke about the war in Ukraine and Russia, and we've seen how that has impacted not only directly but indirectly. We need fertilizers for our crop production, but we don't produce it, and so we still rely on them for some major things because the lands that we're using, what we found is that after a period of time it will become depleted, and so we have to have supplements so that we can continue agricultural production at a level so that we can meet our local needs and we can go be able to provide these produce or products by products to our neighboring countries. So this is a step forward in becoming the breadbasket of the Caribbean. And if we look at it and we try to jump in as Guyanese, we try to see where we can step in and contribute and to lend towards this whole movement of becoming the breadbasket of the Caribbean.
Awesome. I think
I
what I heard you say, Julius, around having land and being mindful of need of fertilizer and other inputs. I want to double back before Kurt jumps in on a point Aubrey made. You know, when we entered 2020 and we saw food shortages, let me translate this into numbers for our viewers. We as a Caribbean are apparently importing about 80 plus percentage of our food. 80% of our food products, despite the land, despite our ability to produce in the Caribbean. And so, as Aubrey referenced the Agri Forum that was held just in May in Guyana, I saw that one of the things that the Caribbean nations or CARICOM nations were targeting is a reduction in our import by 25%. So, Guyanese, as we talk about agriculture, this is what is before us, an issue, but an opportunity to reduce that 83% food bill to something that we as the Caribbean and we as Guyanese benefit from as we produce food, not only for ourselves, but for our neighbors. Kurt, your reflections.
Thank you, Siobhan. I listened to the previous speakers and yourself, and I am in total agreement with what they have said. I was doing some research as well about agriculture in Guyana, and Index Mundi, I think indexmundi.com, they were on their website it indicated that Guyana uses 8.4% of land mass in agriculture, total agricultural production, and 8.4% is not a significant amount based on our land mass. So for me, an opportunity, someone mentioned opportunity before. For me, an opportunity is there for us to diversify and for us to increase. Um, what I would like to see more of, taking into consideration all that was discussed previously, and especially this new conflict or new war in Ukraine and Russia, I would like to see us diversify more. Currently, there's an indication that grain and wheat will become scarce on the market because of the effect of that conflict. So for us as Guyanese, how can we diversify? What else can we produce as a substitute for not just for us to utilize, but for us to export to the Caribbean? And this is an opportunity that we can seize, not just for now, but for the future. And we should also be forward thinking in anticipating what more. Suppose there's another war with another country, another conflict in another area. What this is where I would like us to see our authorities really coming, creating think tanks maybe, and focus groups maybe, and beginning to really think about agriculture and where do we want to go, what do we want to do, how can we encourage more farmers, how can we encourage more citizens to come on board, to get on board with this plan. Agriculture has money, not just in crops but in livestock as well. I think we need to make that point. It encompasses crops and livestock. And as we focus on our home first we need to ensure we have a supply for our nation, Guyana. And then we can think about increasing to the Caribbean and maybe even further afield. And as you said, moderator, there's an opportunity here for Ghana to earn. I think currently agriculture brings in 16.8% on average, 17% average approximately contribute to the GDP. That's a significant amount. However, why not go to 25%? Why not go to 30% as a contributor to the GDP? So this is where I'd like to see us going, creating focus groups, creating think tanks, trying to anticipate the next conflict, where it will be, what it will affect, and going from there and just developing our plan rather than reacting. We can be more proactive, Madam Moderator.
Kurt, you mentioned opportunities and what we can do, and immediately institutions came to mind. Institutions in Guyana such as banks. We're talking about the effects that the Ukraine-Russia war has on our nation and in the Caribbean as a whole. I'm thinking about, for example, that bank in its business loan programs, it offers agricultural loans, such as loans for poultry farming and other things. So maybe if other banks and other lending institutions follow the pattern, to at least help our farmers, those young ones that are now starting, to let them know that although there may be a world economic recession or inflation in certain parts of the world, we see the value and the importance of agriculture, and so we're willing to not only give you loans, but brace you during this period. And I think that may be an opportunity, because you let our people know that yes, our lending and institutions are behind us and they're backing us. Then we can go into this direction and help Guyana truly become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. So I was just thinking about that.
Limar, I'm happy you mentioned funding, because I believe any industry that we're talking about, we will need funding to get things moving or to accelerate what we're doing. And so, in addition to you referencing the agricultural loans of banks, I was reflecting on the context of Switzerland, where we are residing, and the fact that Switzerland's agriculture industry thrives because there are a lot of subsidies. And so, again, I'm just framing this as an opportunity where, when we receive revenues from oil, and I know we're hoping oil will do so many things, but even in our national budgets, that as we try to push the agriculture sector at a national level, there's an opportunity to look at subsidies. Now, if we speak to our large and small scale farmers, how do we see the need? What are the needs or the ideas around technology, around soil management, and so on and so forth, that small or large scale or medium scale farmers should be considering?
In terms of um, having better equipment and higher forms of technology, now we are heading in the direction of a more climate smart agriculture. They are heading in a direction where we are now trying to adapt, because different places have varying temperature where crops are grown and all of those things. These climate smart agricultural practices are now there to adapt to those conditions that are present within those specific countries. And for the Caribbean, is our problem here is a lot of heat. So that is what climate smart agriculture is trying to adapt to in this part of the world. And I remember at the Agri Investment Forum, I was asking about how do you go on an extremely large scale when it comes to poultry production, because since the war as well, we have experienced a very huge shortage in chicken in the country. So I was trying to get an idea as to if this would be a good opportunity for us to venture out into something bigger and more larger. And yes, that the answer is yes. You are able to venture out into that area where you could produce a larger quantity of poultry. They told me that it takes $50 million to have the startup that they have, and they mine a couple, well, thousands of birds. So, and it's all enclosed. They don't they don't take up a lot of land space, even though there is a lot of land space in Ghana to use, and everything is enclosed and it is done with technology. Feeding is done automatic, watering automatic, and all of these things automatic, because we're going into a place where higher technology is being involved in production. And just a side one, we're heading into forestry is also a big part of agriculture, as well as fisheries and aquaculture. So yeah.
Awesome. Technology, any other reactions? Julius,
I
Kurt,
was
Limar?
just I was just about to jump in, Siobhan. Thank you. Um, Agriculture as well. It has a significant, as I'm going to talk about the labor force before as I go to technology. Agriculture as well has a significant amount of employees, or should I say, the sector employs a significant amount of Guyanese. It's about 17% of the entire national labor force. They are employed in agriculture. Now, this is a significant amount of people. However, Guyana, as we know, we do not have 1 million persons. So for us to really expand and for us to really maximize agricultural production, we really would have to move towards technology. As we increase and as we should increase to maximize our potential, the labor force would not be enough. Currently, it's at 17% of the national labor force. So for us to really um, to diversify, for us to go into agro processing, we would need to employ these various types of technologies that Aubrey and Miriam mentioned earlier, and to really be efficient, to go to medium scale to large scale, we cannot employ 50 persons and for it to be efficient. Guyana is known as a popular destination for agriculture because the labor is it's what should I say? It's on the inexpensive side. However, for us to really become and maintain, becoming the breadbasket of the Caribbean is one thing. Now we have to maintain that is something totally different. First, we first need to understand what we need to produce for Guyanese. So that's 750 something thousand that we speak about consistently amount of persons living in the country. We need to figure out exactly what we need to feed those persons, whether it be in fishery, whether it be in crops, whether it be in livestock. We need to figure out what is required to feed our population and maintain that. And when we've achieved that comfortably, then we can begin to look at exporting to the Caribbean and the world at large. And with that comes at a regular cycle. We need to provide at a regular cycle. So we'll have to have the equipment that I think the large scale combines, the large scale, the arable fields where we can rotate crop, that we can have crop rotation and not be replanting and replanting on the same land over and over. Of course, we will lose the fertility and the crop standard or quality will diminish. So these are things that I would like to see us be deliberate and acting on, opening new farmlands in the interior, opening new farmlands in different areas, producing different crops because we know Our main exports are rice and sugar, and sugar has been around for over 300 years. So we really need to diversify. Why can't we not produce on a larger scale more okras? How much? Why can we not produce for our nation and then export various crops, Belange, why not, or Bora, or even add new things? I think Aubrey can speak more to superfoods, the foods like kale and so forth. Those are foods that has great nutritional value. Why can we not focus on those and gain money from them? The superfoods, we can charge more for them. We have the land. Our land is suitable and fertile and really, what should I say, compatible for those types of food. So I would really like to see us go in that direction, Siobhan.
One of the things that I want to add, I love that you've mentioned the importance of moving and utilizing technology. But I want to talk on a tangential point, that is infrastructure. I noticed that we're going in the right direction in developing our roadways, and those important, that is an important part of really and truly tapping into our agricultural potential, because we can boast about the farmlands and everything, but how do we access it? How do we get to it? And so moving in developing roads. So I was thinking, and I was talking with a friend, you know, we have trips at our youth group, Nolly Secundus, and we go into all of these areas, the hinterland areas and what's not. But it usually takes a long period of time. We look at, I'm sure Siobhan and Kurt can speak about Switzerland and how it is quite easy for you to get to point A from point B, or to point B from point A, just a matter of couple minutes sometimes. Whereas in Guyana, to go from region 4 to region 1, it would take 2 days, 3 days. So developing and much more emphasis on our infrastructure and our roadways is a step in the right direction, because we can have the technology in, let's say, in Georgetown, but we need to get it to the place where the lands and the farmers can utilize it, and really and truly they can yield, higher harvest and other things. So having roads, good roads, and better infrastructure is an emphasis should be placed on that.
While I agree with the whole notion of technology, and as Limar would have rightly stated, the need for robust infrastructural work, I think that one of the major things that we have, overlooked is policies, government policies geared towards agriculture. We what we have would have been policies that would have been set a whole how many years ago, and would have been focusing primarily on our traditional crops, which we are begging to move in the direction of diversifying. But we need policy changes. We need better policies that will guide our agricultural production. What we're seeing happening is that some of our prime agricultural land is actually being given out for house lots. And so if we have proper framework, then we will recognize that the prime agricultural land needs to be given for agricultural production, and that will encourage more persons. Because take for example, you give a guy 20 acres of land in the sandy area. Now you now have to battle what is the best suited crop I can grow there, and then you now have to carve out your market for that crop, because more than likely it's something that is not readily demanded on the market. And so we need that policy framework. I was only Friday in Barbies and in Glasgow. And there's this guy. This guy was featured for so many months, or probably years, with his efforts with grape production and these other exotic crops. You have like strawberry and apples and so on. These are the things that have been said that cannot be grown in Guyana. But we have seen the effort by this guy, and he has proven our theory we had as incorrect because it's been grown. Maybe he has a private, a secret recipe that he's using. But if we have proper framework in place for massive research, for massive studies, right, so that we can develop these new crops that are coming in. And if we have that framework, I think that agriculture can, because one of the critical elements in agricultural production requires research, continuous research, and it requires proper policy framework so that we can guide and we can be better able to move in the direction that we want to go.
Powerful, Julius, and maybe I'll allow Aubrey and the others to react. But what I'm hearing here is when you look at agriculture from a national landscape, there are several things that need to converge, and policy is where it comes all together. I heard Limar talk about transportation network. I wanted to talk about that and the supply chain. You need to talk about storage, as you move it from the farm to the point of export. How do you keep it fresh? We need to talk about, as Julius, you spoke about research. We want to offer our viewers and our citizens different options for farming. So this gentleman that has been growing grapes in Guyana, maybe he wants to have a niche marketing in exotic fruits. There is the option to have bio products in Switzerland go at almost double the price of products produced with fertilizers. So those are some of the things I'm listing. Kurt, you mentioned labor, and I believe that Julius, being in the education sector, I'd be curious to hear what programs we have to encourage persons to deliberately choose agriculture as an area of study, rather than some of the stories we heard even from our own panelists who kind of ended up in agriculture by some other circumstances, but now they love it. So, how do we transfer your love, Julius, your love, Aubrey, of agriculture, Marian, to others? And Kurt, when you mentioned labor and the need for technology, one of the things that I reflected on is that Guyana needs to have a mindset that at some point, even when technology helps us to scale up, we will also need to contemplate importing labor. Living here in Geneva, Switzerland, we see what we call the frontalier, where the Swiss economic system depends on the Italians and the French crossing the border. I remember my grandfather traveling from Guyana to Guadeloupe as a parboiler, as they call it, or pan boiler in the sugar industry. So Guyana also needs to be open and prepared that we might have to import seasonal workers. We see this with the Mexicans crossing the border to the US, on a seasonal basis. So those are just some of the things I wanted to throw out there in terms of policy. But I don't know, reactions from you, Aubrey, building on what Julius has posited to us.
Yes, of course. And in terms of, I'll start with the end and then go up. In terms of having things there encouraging people to enter into the field of agriculture, because now we are getting into a very diverse form of practicing agriculture. There are now things like drones that, as soon as children see they're interested in, and drones can be used to fertilize crops. Drones can be used to do a lot of things. So persons are now interested in those types forms of practicing agriculture. There's also the use of what is the program? It uses the satellite to map out the layout of the soil and to give you an average as to how much acres you're working with and all that. When it comes to me, I'll mention it. And you also spoke about, so those are some things that are there to encourage persons who are younger, who are more immature, towards going into agriculture, and those are some minor things that can encourage them into the field. What I wanted to touch on is that you spoke about transportation and transporting goods and so on to produce to and fro. So in Perica, I believe Perica produces around 60% of the entire country's produce, right? But even though Perica produces that amount of produce for tongue, a lot of that produce is lost because of the fact that cannot transport everything that they have made straight out the tongue. And so a large percentage of it goes to wastage. And something that I would have been discussing with some of my colleagues is that we first need to monitor a few small problems that we have in terms of ensuring that we could deliver all of the produce that we have, so that when we are now tackling other issues like exporting and importing, we are making full use of what we already have. And that comes back to Limar's point, where we have to produce proper access roads to these places, proper facilities whereby it could be stored and transported to and fro, so that we'd minimize the waste and we'd maximize the usage of the goods that we actually produce. Um, Back over to you.
Well, I think we're out of time, so I'm going to give two persons 15 seconds. What is the game changer for agriculture in Guyana?
For me, one of the important policy too that acts as a game changer is the new program the Guyana National Bureau of Standards has implemented, Made in Guyana. Our identity is important. If we are to become the breadbasket of the Caribbean, present ourselves as the breadbasket. So Made in Guyana is an excellent initiative to show that Guyanese products are world class. And so that is something we can tap into and continue to make Guyana great and the breadbasket of the Caribbean.
If I may quickly add, when we think about agriculture, we normally only focus on the fresh produce and fresh meat. But it's important if we become the breadbasket of the Caribbean, then this is where value added products comes in. So rather than consuming everything fresh, then we can have the opportunity now of improving our value added products and having much more widespread use of things when they're out of season. Instead of consuming everything fresh, and then we mentioned earlier about the spoilage, then this is where the post-harvest techniques comes in terms of proper transportation with the right temperature and storage, in terms of not in the hot sun like we do in Guyana here most times, but having the correct transportation unit to transport the produce at the right temperature and keeps fresh while it gets to the receiver of it. So value added in terms of also ensure that you have the produce to consume when it's out of season. So with that being said, thank you for listening and being a part of the panel tonight.
Awesome, Marianne. We couldn't have had a better close. And I want to thank our panelists and I want to thank our viewers for remaining with us. I think what we heard today was we went through the inputs needed. We talked about having land and having labor and needing technology. I think we talked about the enablers. We need policy. We need policy on stockpiling. We need policy on value add, as Marianne is just saying. I referenced subsidies to ensure that our agriculture product will survive. And I think the outcome for me is back to Vision 25 by 2025. I think it was a powerful theme at the Agri Investment Expo, because as Guyanese, as the Caribbean, we need to acknowledge or keep at our focus that we need to reduce that 83% import bill. And if we can reduce it by 25% by 2025, we would have been helping ourselves and our Caribbean brothers to becoming the breadbasket and achieving food security is what I wanted to see. So our time is gone. Viewers, we want to thank you for staying and being faithful. Please keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. Join us again on 17th of July for another episode. I am Siobhan Corbin, your moderator for today, and I really want to thank our panelists for an engaging session. Remain safe. This is Choices Global.